They laughed at a jacket that didn't fit their regulations and a hat that had seen better days. They didn't notice the hands, scarred in ways a classroom can't teach. They didn't see the coin in his palm, or the names he still carries. But someone else did. And when the door opened, every crisp salute in that room suddenly felt louder than a joke. If the story moves you, share it with someone who still keeps a folded flag close. Send us a name you remember and why. Subscribe to Endless Stories so these voices don't go quiet when the room gets loud. He didn't enter the officers' club like a ghost or a legend. He walked in the way Midwestern men do when winter holds a last bite. Shoulders forward, eyes soft, hat in hand. The club sat on the edge of a National Guard training site outside Columbus, Ohio, brick warmed by late sun, flag high and still. Inside, the bar top was a runway of glass, steel taps, and framed photos of men and women who'd learned hard lessons with dirt under their nails. He looked like he didn't belong because belonging had never been his skill set. The jacket was an old field coat, Vietnam-era cut with modern patches that didn't match. One elbow repaired by a civilian tailor who didn't know what those seams had touched. On the breast was a small rectangular ribbon rack. 2 rows, nothing flashy. Above a name tape long since faded. Riley. The hat was a ball cap from a town no one here had heard of. He took it off when he crossed the threshold. At a high table near the window, 3 young officers, fresh bars shining, boots that hadn't tasted enough gravel, laughed with the easy confidence of people who haven't yet met their limits. Second lieutenants, by the look. One wore a ranger-tabbed morale shirt as if cloth could transfer grit. Another scrolled through a group chat named Wardroom Wits, their beers sweated into neat rings. They'd spent the day in a classroom learning doctrinal diagrams. Clean arrows across clean maps. No mud. No missing. The veteran paused at the bar. Coffee, if you have it. His voice was sanded smooth by years. The bartender, prior service, sleeve ink that hid a story, nodded and set a mug to drip under the machine. The room smelled like hickory smoke and fryer oil, like polished wood and warmed leather. TVs above the bar cycled through muted baseball, a recruiting commercial, then a highlight reel of armored vehicles rolling across desert floor that looked like a video game's best imitation of war. "Hey, sir." One of the lieutenants called to him, the way some call anyone older, sir, when they mean the opposite. Wrong building. Veterans Halls down the road. The other grinned. Or the thrift store. That jacket should get a discount. Laughter flared and died when it didn't catch. The bartender slid the mug over. The old man wrapped both hands around it like warmth was a memory you protect. He didn't answer. Didn't give them the friction they wanted. He looked at the photos on the wall instead. A medic kneeling by a road. A pair of black hawks against a gray sky. A graduation day with smiles that didn't survive the year. There, barely catching light in the corner frame. Fort Irwin dust, 2008. A unit patch that matched one he'd once worn stood crooked by the photographer's angle. He didn't step closer. Some distances you respect. "Hey!" the Ranger T said, louder now that the room had noticed. "If you're going to wear ribbons, at least get 'em straight. That's not how we do things now." The veteran's thumb traced the rim of the mug. He'd spent 30 years training himself to answer only when the answer would help. 30 years of stepping into rooms where he wasn't invited. Mud huts, shipping containers, hospital hallways that smelled of antiseptic and absence. He'd learned that volume was a poor substitute for consequence. "Leave it," the bartender warned. Quiet as a safety clicked off. But the lieutenants were too new to hear quiet things. "Come on, old-timer. Tell us about the big one. Did you teach John Rambo how to tie his boots?" Another laugh, edgier, eager. It hit the wood and scattered, too light to leave a mark. The veteran didn't flinch. He set the mug down without drinking. Inside his fist, a challenge coin pressed into calluses. Oxidized edge, a trident and anchor stamped shallow by thumb where the date nearly rubbed away. He didn't flash it. He didn't need to. Symbols should be handled like folded flags. He slid his hat onto the bar, brim forward. On the underside, sharpened in block letters so faded they were nearly memory. East of Jalalabad. 3 coordinates. A date. The door opened on a draft of clean, cold air, and every shoulder in the room twitched from years of training they didn't know they had yet. A hush rolled in like fog off Lake Erie, slow, absolute. He didn't turn to see who entered. He felt the room rearrange itself and knew. Sometimes America's story is a jacket that doesn't fit the new rules. Sometimes it's a young voice trying on authority by borrowing sarcasm. And sometimes it's the sound of a rank that has been earned showing up right on time. He lifted the mug, took one sip, burned his tongue, didn't wince, set it down. "Son," he said, not unkind. "Do you know what you're laughing at?" The second lieutenant opened his mouth. The door closed, and the answer changed shape. No one announced the general. He announced himself by omission. No entourage, no clatter of words. The silver star on each shoulder wasn't the loudest thing about him. It was the way he looked first at exits and then at people in the order of the job. Tall but not towering, hair close-cropped gray, wedding ring worn smooth. His uniform said U.S. Army. The eyes said, "I will remember the names." The bartender stiffened. The lieutenant scrambled upright, heels clicking, back straightened by reflex. The veteran didn't move. When you've stood in a doorway between a blast and your team, you learn not to flinch for rank, only for danger. "At ease," the general said, which means nothing unless the person receiving it has earned anything. The lieutenants relaxed the way new trees bend in wind. He took a step deeper into the club, gaze sweeping, cataloging. Then his eyes landed on the jacket, the wrong one, and the man wearing it, and something old and unspoken crossed his face. He approached without hurry. He didn't glance at the young officers, not first. He stopped an arm's length from the veteran and lowered his voice, which had the opposite effect of a shout. "Evening." The veteran nodded. "Evening, General." The bartender drifted down the bar like a witness and an usher all at once, stopping just short of the place where the conversation changed ownership. Television soundtracks turned to murmurs. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer chirped and was silenced with a palm. The general took the hat off the bar and turned it in his hands. He paused at the underside, the coordinates, the date. He didn't ask. He knew better than to drag ghosts into public. He set the hat back exactly where it had been. Then he reached 2 fingers toward the veteran's ribbon rack, stopped half an inch shy, a near salute to the cloth, and traced the air. "Combat Infantryman Badge. 2 tours. Bronze Star with V device. Air Medal," he said, "not for theatrics but because accuracy is a form of respect. You wore it all long enough for it to fray." The lieutenant's ears flushed the color of training bruises. The one in the Ranger T swallowed, then found his voice clinging to a shaky ladder. "Sir, we were just—" "You were practicing," the general cut in, not unkind. "Practicing a voice you think you'll need. Here is a better one." He shifted, not to square off but to widen the space for everyone to hear. It felt like the opposite of a courtroom and exactly like judgment. In 2008, at Fort Irwin, a platoon from the 155th was running lanes. A Black Hawk came down in a brownout after dust-off. He waited, in case any of them needed to translate dust-off into the human words "someone bleeding in a bird." And the LZ went sideways. Who pulled soldiers out before the second bird touched skids? A staff sergeant with an old jacket and a habit of walking toward noise. He didn't say the name. He didn't need to. The veteran stayed still, eyes on the mug he'd barely touched. In 2011, the general continued, and the televisions seemed to mute themselves more, an advisory team made the wrong turn on the east side of Jalalabad. A truck bomb, premature, thank God, still tore the market apart. Local police froze. Americans didn't. A man in a hat like that dragged a boy out from under a vendor table, then went back for the woman who didn't know which leg was hers. He gave his tourniquet and took a measure of shrapnel the size of a quarter in return. He did not put in for an award, because he knew some days the ribbon is breath and bread and both are already spoken for. The lieutenants had lowered their eyes by then, not because they were chickens caught pecking, but because something in them recognized the posture of learning. The veteran's knuckles whitened around the coin. He hadn't wanted a scene, but he also hadn't planned for one to arrive wearing 4 stars and a memory. The general turned to the young officers. "You will lead. People who've lived longer than your mistakes will follow you. If you are lucky, the ones like him will still be around to keep you honest. The Ranger T nodded, eyes bright with the quick sting of understanding. Roger, sir. The general faced the veteran again and offered a handshake that stopped short, then became something else. Palm over fist, the way guys from different decades pass a single, heavy truth between them. Staff Sergeant Riley, he said. You still owe me a beer. Riley looked up, finally, and the years rearranged themselves across his face into something like a smile. I paid that tab in 2012, sir. Not in Ohio, you didn't, the general said. And definitely not in my house. The bartender exhaled the breath she'd been saving for an emergency. On me, she said, setting a bottle down and stepping back because some moments need room more than hosts. Around them, the club remembered how to breathe. Laughter returned, quieter, more tuned. One of the lieutenants pulled his phone out, then put it face down on the table without lighting the screen. The magnitude had shifted, not in volume, in gravity. When the general finally raised his voice, it wasn't to scold. It was to teach. Gentlemen, ma'am, he said to the room at large. We get to wear a uniform because people who didn't go to your commissioning ceremony wore it first. Don't confuse shine with weight. The door didn't open then, but it felt like it had. Something bigger than rank had walked in and taken a seat. They asked him to tell it, and he didn't. A full story would have required too many permissions from the dead. But the general held the floor long enough to sketch a map the army doesn't issue. Doctrine will teach you how to move a platoon through a U-shaped ambush, he said, thumb circling condensation on the neck of the beer. But doctrine will not teach you that the private you just yelled at has a sister who needs rides to chemo. It will not teach you that the Afghan farmer who never makes eye contact does it out of respect, not guilt. Doctrine won't tell you when to lie to a mother, so she can sleep a single night without that picture in her head. The room didn't creak, but the silence did. The veteran's eyes were on the photographs again, as if the frames made better listeners than people. You learn that map from the ones who've already walked it, the general continued. People who screw up, who pay, who keep showing up anyway. Staff Sergeant Riley once told a brand new captain me, Sir, if you're explaining, you're not listening. It was the kindest gut punch I ever got. A couple of heads turned. Of course it had been this general he'd corrected. The myth wrote itself, but the man didn't let it. And he fixed my mistake without writing it down, the general added. He just made it impossible to repeat around him. He didn't dress it in heroism. He draped it in maintenance. That's how you keep a machine running that was designed by imperfect hands to do impossible things. One of the lieutenants, freckles and a stubborn jaw that would serve him well, finally spoke. Sir, permission to ask, how do we make it, right? When we get it wrong. Riley answered before the general could. His voice was a creak under ice, resigned, alive. You don't. You make it forward. He let the coin rotate once in his hand, metal brushing bone. You apologize like you mean it, and then you carry something for someone until your back knows the shape. The general nodded. And you stop trying to earn forgiveness like it's a ribbon for your own chest. A major in the corner, sleeves rolled, wedding band off because it irritated his glove hand, cleared his throat. We've been training cadets all week, he said. They think leadership lives on slides. It does, Riley said. The slides are the blueprint. But the house is the whisper you use when a kid is shaking and won't let go of the steering wheel. It's the joke you refuse to make because it would buy you 5 seconds of relief and cost someone else a year of sleep. It's the phone call you place at 2 a.m. because you told a father you would. He didn't look at the lieutenants when he said it. He didn't need to. The words knew where to land. The general put his bottle down. In a few months you'll brief a mission, he told the young officers. You'll tell people where to stand and how to move and what to shoot. If someone older than you, in a jacket like that one, touches your elbow and says, Sir, try door 2 first, you will try door 2 first. The Ranger T blew out a breath that turned into a chuckle at himself. Yes, sir. And when you see one another pressing jokes against a thing that is not a toy, the general added, glancing at the ribbon rack with its quiet geometry, you will change the subject. You will offer coffee. You will say, tell me about the day, not the medal. And if they don't want to, you will watch the game in silence. Like that is the loudest respect you own. Riley's mouth tilted at one corner. You do talk prettier than you used to, sir. The general laughed. First real sound of ease to break the solemn. That would be my wife, he said. She coaches me by text. Phones buzzed. Coincidentally, no one checked theirs. The bartender, who had watched platoons march in and out of this room for a decade, set a plate of fries down that none of them had ordered. It's what you feed people when they've been carrying something. On the house, she said. Riley didn't reach for the fries. He reached for his coffee, which had cooled, and drank it anyway. General, he said, there's a bench in a park off Livingston Avenue. The general's eyes flicked to the coordinates under the hat brim. I know it, he said. Riley nodded. Tomorrow morning, he said. If you want to remember why we bother. No one asked what we meant. The map drew itself around the pronoun. It wasn't Arlington or a monument anyone sells on postcards. The bench faced a pond half-choked with cattails. Two ducks arguing like old roommates. November light in Ohio pretends to be gold but forgets. Halfway to the ground, and turns pewter instead. A jogger passed, earbuds in, soundtrack a private war. A school bus squeaked around a corner and plotted a route through the courage of small mornings. He sat, hat beside him, coin in his palm. The general arrived without staff cars or salute. Just a long coat and his hands out of pockets. Because you don't hide them when you're about to shake. He didn't sit right away. He looked at the water as if it could hand him something he'd lost out there where no water runs. A boy on a bicycle dragged a rear brake to stop. He had a camera strung around his neck, Polaroid, square film, fashionably retro because some kids ache for the grip of the physical. He didn't ask what the men were doing. He just took a picture of the way sunlight touched the metal coin and the scar along Riley's thumb. Don't post that, son, the general said, gentle. The boy nodded like someone who understands that some pictures are prayers you keep. He tucked the photo into his hoodie pocket and pedaled on. They sat. They didn't call roll. They didn't deliver speeches. The general kept his eyes on the pond, counting ripples like steps walked beside a casket. Riley rubbed the coin and then set it on the bench between them, an offering a little smaller than a life. They were boys, he said. And then they weren't. The general didn't ask which war. It didn't matter. America's wars pour into each other like rivers. By the time you taste it, the water is all the same. Mendez laughed with his whole mouth. Riley went on. Like he was biting an apple no one else could see. Ward couldn't remember a lyric all the way through but could fix any engine with only a half-full toolbox and a stubborn prayer. I had a corporal like that, the general said. Name of Kincaid. He told me once that the trick of fear is to let it ride shotgun but never let it take the wheel. Riley smiled without showing teeth. Smart man. They stopped talking. One duck, irritated at something inscrutable, flapped hard and shifted the pond's surface like a combat landing. They watched until the ripples evened and the morning exhaled. A woman approached, middle-aged, parka zipped to her chin, a coffee balanced in each hand. She stopped 2 feet from the bench and extended one cup. For whoever needs it more, she said. Riley gestured to the general, who accepted it with a nod as formal as a presentation of colors. She didn't wait for thanks. She walked on. You asked yesterday, the general said after a full minute had passed without needing words. Why we bother? I didn't ask, Riley said. I invited. Fair. The general conceded. Here's my answer anyway, because in a country as loud as ours, a little quiet with strangers keeps the roof from rattling off. Riley looked at the coin, at the bench, at the water. Because we said we would, he corrected, and the general did not argue because that was the higher law. The boy on the bike circled back and stopped, guilt warring with curiosity. Sir? He asked to both of them. Can I? Is there a name I should say? The general looked at Riley. Riley looked at the pond. He had a dozen, but saying them all here would make the bench sink under the weight. He chose 2. Mendez, he said. Ward. The boy repeated them, tried the taste of each, put them in his pocket where the photo rested. I'll say them, he promised. You do that, Riley said. and the words made the morning warmer by a degree you could feel on your knuckles. They didn't stay long. You don't loiter inside a promise. You tap the sign and keep moving. When they rose, the general set his empty cup on the trash lid with the precision of a man who has telegraphed his respect into smaller gestures than most people notice. Riley flipped the coin into the air, caught it, and let it land on the back of his hand. Heads, because some days the story agrees with you. They walked out together, not in step and exactly in step. The club didn't plan an event. It just happened. A gravity well around a point no one could see. Word leaked the way truth does, through bartenders and majors' wives, through a supply sergeant who cuts hair on weekends and has opinions about everything he's earned. By the next evening, when the doors opened, no one laughed at jackets. The librarian from the town branch showed up first, hair in a bun that had surrendered the fight, carrying a shoebox. She placed it on the bar and lifted the lid. Within letters, old ones with stamps you had to lick, newer ones folded around printed notices from the VA. "If you want to put one away somewhere it won't get lost," she said. "I'll help." The mail carrier came in uniform and left a stamp sheet on the counter, forever, and someone wrote the joke in a small way that didn't mock. A good kind of forever. The high school wrestling coach slid a trophy across the bar and asked the bartender to polish the nameplate for a kid who never returned to claim it. A nurse dropped off a stack of blank cards with a sign. "Write 3 words you wish you'd said sooner. No speeches. Just movement. America knows how to do that when it remembers." The lieutenants came back, ties loosened as if they'd argued with themselves and lost. They didn't avoid the veteran. They approached and stood in an awkward wedge, like aircraft trying to land in crosswind. "Staff Sergeant Riley," the Ranger T said. The nickname retired for the night. "We're sorry." Riley, for whom apologies had been currency and custom both, glanced at the general's empty chair. He hadn't arrived yet. He let them stew in responsibility for exactly how long they'd need to never forget the flavor. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Buy someone else a drink, not me." They did. They bought one for the mail carrier, who didn't drink, and she lifted water with the dignity of a toast that counts. In the corner, a TV ran a documentary with captions on. A platoon patrolling through a place that looked like Mars and sounded like Tuesday. A kid at the end of the bar, 18 at most, switched it to a baseball game and immediately looked guilty, as if entertainment were a betrayal. The bartender left it. There are 1,000 ways to honor and only one way to make everyone miserable. The general arrived late, coat dusted with road salt, a duffel across his shoulder. He set it on a table and opened it to reveal something no one expected in a bar. Not a sword or a flag or a plaque with brass eagles. A sewing kit, thread, needles heavy enough to bite canvas. "I hear there are patches out there that want to stay on jackets that won't behave," he said. And the room smiled with their eyes because the mouth would have been too loud. He took Riley's sleeve, with permission, and made 3 small, perfect stitches to anchor the corner of a unit patch that had wandered. Then he passed the needle to the Ranger T. "Your turn," he said. The lieutenant's hands shook the way a man's do when he realizes finesse is another kind of bravery. He put the thread through and drew it. The bartender dimmed the lights by 1 click, the volume down by 1 notch. The room got narrower in the best way, like focusing a camera. A woman with a buzz cut and a purple heart tattoo watched from the doorway, then stepped inside and placed 2 photographs under a salt shaker. One of a young Marine with eyes like his mother's, one of a field of wheat swaying like the ocean. "He wanted to be a farmer," she said to no one and everyone. "Say his name," the general answered. Needle paused. "Casey." They did, softly, around the room, and the sound made the walls sturdier. An old guy in a motorcycle vest rolled a patch between finger and thumb, then set it down without adding it to his leather. Just touching it seemed to be enough. A pastor in civilian clothes filled out one of the nurse's cards. "I'm proud of you." A teenager with chipped nail polish wrote, "I forgive you." The librarian sorted letters into stacks. To be answered and to be filed and to be read when it rains. No one announced a moment of silence. There were dozens. Around 10, when the fryer had been turned off and the smell of oil surrendered to wood and breath, the general stood. He didn't raise his glass. He raised the needle and thread. "To the people who teach us the quiet parts," he said, and threaded one more stitch. He left before dawn, as men like him prefer to. He put the jacket on, same wrong right one, and tucked the coin into a pocket that wasn't designed for it but had learned. The general didn't escort him. He just shook his hand in the parking lot under a light that buzzed like a bad memory and said, "Tomorrow? Same bench?" Riley nodded. "So long as the ducks show." They did. He sat. The boy returned with a newer camera, the kind that makes no sound because it disrespects nothing. He didn't shoot. He just sat and learned the art of being alongside. News of what had happened in that club leaked in small-town ways. A column in the local paper that used we a lot. A photo of hands and thread without faces. An email from the librarian inviting volunteers. An empty chair in a city council chamber with a jacket draped across it and a sign that read "Leave space." Someone's coming back. Nothing viral. Everything permanent. Riley's life did not become cinematic. He still changed his truck's oil by himself. He still bought day-old bread because he liked the crust better. He still slept badly some nights, and well, the ones where the wind rattled the branches like distant rotors. He still whispered names on dates the rest of the world had scheduled soccer games. But something had shifted. Not his story, its gravity. The next time a young officer with a borrowed joke tried to spend it, 3 others paid attention and changed the subject. The next time a kid in a denim jacket wore his granddad's unit patch, someone at the grocery store told him which side it goes on and then said, "Keep it there." The next time the pastor wrote a eulogy, he called the bartender first and asked what kind of fries the boy had liked. The general sent no orders about any of it. He merely showed up at the bench, at the bar, at a high school assembly where he said exactly 13 sentences and none of them made a promise the army couldn't keep. He started carrying a pocketful of needles. People got used to seeing a 4-star thread cloth like he was tuning a guitar. It did something to the room every time. On a Thursday just before snow, Riley walked into the club and the lieutenants stood without glancing at each other. It wasn't choreography. It was muscle memory from a new muscle. He lifted a hand and they sat, and the bartender pushed a mug his way without asking, and he paid with exact change and a smile that used to be rarer. He left a note under the coin that the bartender kept near the register. Nothing engraved, nothing heavy. For whoever needs a reminder. Flip me. Heads. Call someone. Tails. Listen. She taped it to the bar with a care usually reserved for diplomas and ultrasound printouts. When the general finally rotated to a new post, because the army is a river, not a lake, he stopped by the bench one last morning. He didn't wear a coat. He sat and shivered like a penance and a joke. "You good?" he asked. Riley considered the pond and the ducks and the way Ohio turns gray without apology. "I'm American," he said. "So I am and I ain't. But I'm better." The general laughed, then grew quiet. "There's something I never told you," he said. "That day at Irwin, when you pulled my private out and then chewed me out for not seeing the dust pattern. You saved me from about 5 years of being the wrong kind of officer." Riley shrugged. "You fixed it. That's the part that matters." The general rose, joints clicking with the music of mileage. He pulled a small box from his pocket, wood-worn smooth, not for medals, but for things you don't want to lose. A pair of dog tags that had found their way home too late. A photo folded into quarters until the creases hid a smile. A scrap of fabric from a flag, age-yellowed and soft as a secret. "Hold on to this for me," he said, passing the box over. "I'll come get it when the snow melts." Riley weighed it, as if measuring the difference between entrusted and burdened. "I'll keep it warm." The general nodded once and walked away. He didn't look back. Leaders don't, not because they don't care, but because the road in front is counting on their eyes. Spring came late and then all at once, the way it does. The general returned, took the box, set a new coin on the bench, fresh edge, unfamiliar weight, and wrote on the underside of the brim of a hat he wore only on days he needed reminding, "Ward, Mendez, Casey." He added one more name, his voice barely more than breath. Riley pretended not to hear. The bench did what benches do. It kept a secret, it held a weight, it faced the water. The club hung no plaque. The town erected no statue. The only monument was a set of stitched patches and a coin that flipped often enough to show where on both sides. Some nights, The bartender wiped the bar and found a note someone had left below their tip. I called. Other nights, I listened. She filed them with the librarian's letters. On the rainiest days, she read a few aloud when the lunch crowd thinned and the friar sighed like an old friend. America didn't change. It turned 1 small degree toward something quieter and heavier and more honest. It felt like a jacket that doesn't line up with the newest cut but still keeps out the wind that matters. It felt like a salute done for the right person at the right time with no cameras. If you were there, at the bar, at the bench, in the room where a joke went still, you learned a lesson you didn't know how to ask for. That shame is cheap and respect is a craft, that the loudest person is rarely carrying the heaviest thing, and that sometimes the general everybody's waiting for walks in so he can point to the veteran you laughed at and say, "He's why we're here." And if you weren't, you're here now. The door is open. The jacket is on the back of a chair. The needle is threaded. Pick up where they left off. Flip the coin. Heads or tails, you owe somebody a call. We don't honor veterans because their stories are perfect. We honor them because they kept showing up when perfect wasn't possible. A jacket that doesn't match regulations. A coin worn thin. A name spoken on a quiet bench. These aren't props. They're proof. Proof that courage survives the noise, that respect is a craft, and that the weight we carry together is lighter than what any one of us bears alone. Tonight, the jokes went silent. Tomorrow, the work continues. Stitch by stitch, call by call, name by name. And if you're wondering where to begin, start where they always did, with someone else in mind. Call to action. If the story meant something to you, do one small thing that lasts. Subscribe to Endless Stories so voices like his don't fade in the feed. Share this piece with someone who still keeps a folded flag or a worn patch. Say a name out loud, then call or listen. Heads or tails, you owe someone a moment. Bring a stitch. Fix a patch. Carry a box. Buy the coffee. Hold the silence. One jacket. One coin. One name at a time.